Welcome back to the Compassionate Capitalist Show. And of course, I'm Karen Rands, the host. And for you that have listened to this show on a regular basis, my topic today is going to be familiar to you because it's something that I like to cover. And in fact, even prior to 2020, I was acutely aware of the capital gap between white male startups and those startups founded by Black, brown, and female entrepreneurs. And year after year, there was this wringing of hands and gnashing of teeth and problem with not a lot of action or remedy. And then when the realizations that many minority-owned businesses were left out of the economic stimulus programs Congress offered at the start of COVID, at the COVID shutdown, and the very public murders of people of color like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, it sent people into the streets and protests. All of a sudden, a giant spotlight was shined on the wealth gap and the capital gap in the between people of color and the traditional white male entrepreneur that you see in most tech startups. And at that time, corporations after corporations, you got Google, Apple, PayPal, they all committed venture funds, and celebrities stepped up to donate to the severely underfunded HBCUs and invest in STEM programs in, schools and inner cities and things like that. And I did a podcast, a short series called Black Prosperity, Past, Present, and Future, which focused on the systemic causes of causal effects of, the wealth gap that we have, the 10x wealth gap between Black households and white households, and the optimism of change in the future at that time. And then I did an update last, a few months back, a third podcast on the 1-year anniversary, and was happy to find out that, many of those newcomers and that had made a commitment to the entrepreneur community of Black and brown founders were sustaining. They had followed through on their commitments, yet even with that change, we still have so far to go. And in Atlanta, despite the city's reputation as the Black Mecca, as the end of 2021, Black entrepreneurs struggled to attract capital with only 12%. I think my guest may correct me on this, but only 12% getting capital out of all the investments made in the Atlanta market. And on a national basis, as of 2021, it was just 1.2% of the record 137 billion invested in U.S. startups that went into the went into Black entrepreneurs, and only 2% went to women-founded companies, according to Crunchbase. And I listened to a podcast recently with Catherine Finney, founder of Genius Guild, a Black-focused venture fund with a slightly different thesis than my guest today. And she was asked if she resented the Johnny-come-latelys that seemed to be jumping on the bandwagon while she had been working on this for decades as an issue for Black-owned businesses, with, in her case, with an impact on Black community. And were there enough, Black-owned businesses for all the money that was coming into the marketplace? And I loved her response. And of course, I'm paraphrasing it here, but she said, bring it. First, we, the Black community of entrepreneurs, are still so acutely underrepresented that there is a lot of ground to cover to even begin to catch up. And the white entrepreneurs don't have an exclusivity on ideas. They have all Black entrepreneurs, they have always been there, and the white financial community just hadn't paid attention. So with that, my guest today is a disruptor and a catalyst to change. She's been featured on Bloomberg TV, Forbes, and Entrepreneur Magazine. She was the winner of the 2020 Unsung Heroes Champion Award by the Female Founders Alliance and the 2020 recipient Atlanta Inno's Fire Award. Sheila Neves Burney, she can wave for those that are watching right now as I finish my introduction, is the founding and managing partner of Zane Venture Fund. The thesis of Zane Ventures is to fund and invest in bold founders who have innovative business models and are building early stage technology solutions with early traction, whether in dollars or data. She's got this information and stuff. Zane mentors and invests in early stage companies, reducing the barriers for diverse founders to reveal their talents and reshape our communities. Working with marginalized groups is not new for Sheila. She has spent over 20 years in her career working to create solutions that address disparities in investment in human capital and underrepresented diverse founders. And it's Sheila. Is it Sheila or Sheila? I'm sorry. I've said it both. I've said it both ways now. And I was like, wait a second. So And I knew that. I was like, and then I said it wrong when I was reading it. So anyway, so Shyla is also the executive in residence at Harvard Ventures and a VC mentor for the Pipeline Angels. So welcome, Shyla. I am so very excited to have you as a featured guest on the Compassionate Capitalist Show.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm happy to be here and kind of share my story and the story of entrepreneurs.
So let's talk about your 20 years of, having an impact in this community before you had the vision and overcome that. I mean, I would think maybe you didn't, but the imposter syndrome of, I'm going to step up and I'm going to start my own fund. So talk about the 20 years and then we'll get into the talking of the fun part.
Sure. So, for me, I started out, I wanted to be an educator my entire life. So started out in the public school system, spent about 15 years. I've always been on the operations side of no matter what organization I worked in. So managing the business operation. And so most of the organizations I chose for my career always focus on helping marginalized communities, right? How do I, not by myself, but as a community of folks, how do we bring up other folks in the community who are not doing well, whether it's health disparities, food disparities, that sort of stuff. I just made it my mission in life to continue to work for organizations who were solving those types of problems. So started in the public school system, moved to Atlanta, started working. The AJC seems like an outlier, but it really isn't because I managed a nonprofit, fundraise internally for that particular nonprofit that we were trying to bring enlightenment to. This was an organization focused on children. And so did that for 5 years, found myself at the American Cancer Society, same thing. How can we bring equity to communities who are dealing with cancer the same way we would do it for a white male? And so did that, found myself into just falling into the nonprofit sector where we were always focused on marginalized community and how do we invest in these communities to make them whole? So 2018, I felt like I had done a good job doing this and now I wanted to do something on my own. So I started my own company. And this was one part was to empower women and the other part was to support small businesses with organizational support, that sort of thing. And so that year I was offered an opportunity to source investors for a startup. And so almost as that whole thing came into play, now that I could take my past experiences of trying to help communities through different programs and resources. And now this is a whole different area, venture capital. And so that's how I found myself in this space.
Okay, really good. So now, I was reading the Forbes article and, really, you almost gave up on venture capital, I guess, in 2018. You thought you had secured a $5 million commitment when the unthinkable happened and you got a double gut punch. Share the story, please, about how, what happened, how it affected you, and how you got the fire in your belly to continue against what may have seemed about insurmountable odds.
Sure. Just a little bit of back information on that. I had been sourcing investors for about 7 months with this entrepreneur. I realized now at the time I was actually getting him capital ready. And was able to access investors through just the network. And we did this for 7 months. We finally got a $5 million letter of intent, and we were waiting for diligence. And we were in diligence at the time. And a few weeks later, my daughter's impacted by gunfire here in the city as we take a shortcut from the suburbs and go through an area that we now know is like one of the top 20 worst neighborhoods in the country. I had no idea living here. And so anyway, she's impacted by gunfire and is, it's the most traumatic moment of our life to see your child being injured. And I'm like, is it the community that's after us? Like, did someone in the community intentionally do this? While my daughter is convalescing, we're waiting for the investor to come back and he decides to drop out of the deal and invest in hotels instead. And I'm with my daughter at the time, who is still convalescing, and I share this with her. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I really want to quit this, because if this is how cutthroat it's going to be, I don't know if I want to be a part of this. And my daughter says to me, no, Mom, you're really good at this. You've met so many entrepreneurs. Why don't you continue doing this? And Karen, when she said that, my mind went to thinking, well, if I raise a fund, I'm going to name it after a strong woman. So I started listing these strong women who I have seen, Michelle Obama, Oprah, and all those kind of names. And I looked squarely at my daughter and I said, you're the strongest person that I know right now. I'm going to name the fund after you. So the fund is named after my daughter, Zane.
Oh, I
Family
did not
name.
know that. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it's a
Excellent.
family
It
name.
is a strong name. That's a very
It's
good
a
name.
very strong name. She got that name from her father, and so we decided let's pursue a fund in 2019, and then eventually launched our fund at the end of 2019. And we all know what happened in 2020. And so it was just a matter of perseverance and resiliency. If I am going to be working with entrepreneurs, preaching resiliency, then I have to find a way for myself to get up and let's go for another day and see how we can make this work for the entrepreneurs in our care.
Yeah. So you and I met at the end of 2021 or near the end of 2021 at the TyCon. And when you were on a keynote and you were saying these things up on stage and the data and the stuff that you were talking about, and it was like ringing bells with me because, you know, the things that I've looked into and stuff like that. And I ran up to you afterwards. I waited and I'm like, oh yeah, you know, tell me. I had no idea you were here. Oh, I'm so excited that you're doing this in Atlanta. And I found out that Sig Mosley, a long-term angel and seed investor in the Atlanta community, often referred to as the godfather of angel investment here in Atlanta, that you know, he had become an investor in your fund. And then I saw him and you kind of talked to him a lot. And I was like, well, how'd you get Sig to invest in this? Because he's got his own fund, you know, and he's like around and stuff. And you told me sort of about sharing stats. And I similarly had that kind of a conversation with some other folks that had during 2020 had, you know, white male investors that had shifted some focus, wanted to put resources towards inclusivity and, you know, those kind of things. And I ran into him at another Thai event not too long ago. And he frankly admitted to me himself that he himself had not been acutely aware of this discrepancy in capital by, you know, were white versus diverse founders, which, you know, I'm kind of like, I thought it was known, you know what I mean? I thought, am I just really that connected that I know about this and the general world doesn't know that? But like me, you know, he kind of thought of money as just green. When I ran my angel investor group, I talk about it, that I never really thought about it. And it's not so much, in some cases, yes, there's a racial bias associated with it. Whether they elect to put money into a deal, there's some of that, but the bigger problem is the sourcing and the action and the effort that goes into making sure that the companies that are coming to you for investment are well represented across the spectrum. And that's one of the things that has I think was the aha moment for a lot of folks. And you know, and he became aware of the impact that, you know, of the non-inclusivity and actually recruiting the diverse founders to apply for capital himself. And so that was why, you know, he respected what you were doing, agreed to, like, a big part of it, agree to it. But it's not just like, oh, I want to do the right thing and put my name on this. He saw that odds were there would be a positive return on investment just because of the community that you are serving in this. So for our listeners, you know, those minority founders, the investors, the angel groups that are listening that have not been proactive, you know, the minority founders that are discouraged, right? And then the capital sources that have not been proactive in including non-white and female founders in the pipeline. Talk about being able to move these investors from their perception and their paradigms with the clear data of the capital gap, but also the proven outcomes and successes that diverse founders have shown in providing a return on investment. Share some of that data and statistics of what you talk to investors about on a daily basis when you're, you know, recruiting for your fund.
Absolutely. So when I first started, you know, I'm a data nut anyway, and that's mainly from my days at the American Cancer Society when I worked. My boss was an epidemiologist, so we couldn't do work unless we could prove that there was, you know, some data behind it. And the numbers just don't lie. And so when I met Sig at the time, there was a report that came out that this was a $4 trillion opportunity. $4 trillion could be added to our if we had
Wow.
invested in diverse founders and entrepreneurs. That's how much could have been added in terms of jobs and that sort of stuff. Karen, that number is 7 trillion today. It has
Oh,
grown.
wow.
And so we as a community of investors are leaving out those type of opportunities. And so for me, that number was jarring at 4 trillion. I'm going, and no one sees this. And so I decided, as I started to talk to people about the $4 trillion opportunity, and then I went a bit further, right? Diverse teams, founders and teams outperform their peers by 33%. Yet they
Wow.
still remain invisible to traditional VC, 33%. Meaning that's how much cash we're returning back to the investors once they make that investment into diverse founders and teams. We all know the number, the negative number about the, and I brought that up, but folks don't like to hear it. It's less than 2% what Black founders actually get in capital. And that's nothing. And I want to go back to the number you brought up earlier around what in Atlanta had invested 12% into Black entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
If you peel that number back, Karen, I think it was like 450 million. If you peel that number back, one company was 343 million. And that was Calendly.
Yeah.
So
They were,
how
yeah.
do we say we're above the rest of the
Oh,
country? We are like exactly like the rest of the country. The problem
wow.
is we have a capital mismatch because we have a more diverse region than the West Coast, than New York, right? In New York, in terms of, and Boston in terms of
Wow.
capital. We have the community here of entrepreneurs, whereas they may say, well, we don't have a large community of Black and brown and women entrepreneurs. We have that here. And so
Oh,
we
yeah.
have a problem. We have a capital mismatch. And so that to me is the biggest story that I'm trying to tell to my investors now. Like, you have the entrepreneurs, folks are moving here. We got high growth companies coming here. They're going to spin out talent. That talent is going to be diverse. Where do they go if they don't have the capital to kind of build their company from ground up?
Yeah.
And so we got to fix that capital mismatch we have here in Atlanta.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what is funny? I think I had heard that statistic about the 7 trillion, 4 trillion, 7 trillion on the economic impact, probably in that podcast I listened to with Catherine. And I'd already forgotten it. And that was just last week that I listened to it. I was sitting here going like, wow, really? You know what I mean? It needs to be said again and again and again. And for those folks listening that just heard that for the first time, let me add to that in saying that impact is when you invest, and this is part of what the compassionate capitalist concept is, right? It's when you choose to put your money into an entrepreneur endeavor because it brings innovation to the market that has a capitalist thing where people buy that, and then money goes into the company, and the company hires people, and they develop other products, and they buy in their supply chain the stuff that they're going to use in their products. And it's the ecosystem that comes out of that. And had money been put into Black owned businesses along this time, that would have been the historic economic. And you think about our US gross domestic product having 7 trillion more in it,
Right.
you might be enough with just tax revenue, be able to bridge the gap of our shortfall and all the stuff that people point to. I mean, whether it be sales tax revenue, whatever, you know what I mean? If you grow your economy by $7 trillion, you solve a whole lot of other problems that are going on. So that needs to be like, that's another spotlight to be shined on that number. And I'm going to commit that to memory so I can be using that on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's a McKinsey report. And I'll find the link and I'll send it to you, Karen, but it's an incredible report that talks about Black businesses and what America could look like if we did invest in these businesses at the same rate that we invest in businesses started by white men.
Yeah. Well, and without going down that other little rabbit trail of the wealth gap, but that's all geared towards the ability to own real estate, starting 50 years ago, actually into World War II, when, all of that and the generational lack of real estate as an asset within the Black community. Right. So, but so then with that, so you brought up, I just went taupe. All right. So let me, like, I was really excited when I saw that he was an investor in your fund because, I had been over the years, I have been asked to participate in multiple think tanks and roundtables with Minority Business Development Center, with all these different organizations, and including one that was commissioned by President Obama in his final year in office to try to figure out how to grow the female minority founded and led startup community in Atlanta to get the money so that they could grow, probably because he'd seen some of these statistics about the economic impact,
I'm
right?
sure.
All right. And so, first and foremost, my recommendation was you have to find a successful African-American founder that would be the Pied Piper, that will give back to the entrepreneur community, to uplift underrepresented founders in the community, but also to, be a walking, talking, proven, invest in me and people that look like me, and you can share in this success without all the risks that I'm taking as the entrepreneur, right? That's kind of my mantra of people becoming angel investors and compassionate capitalists. And so within the Atlanta community, we have two really notable, successful Black entrepreneurs. You got Lonnie Johnson, the inventor of the Super Soaker and other tech-related innovations, specifically to energy. He's pretty much done philanthropic investments and not a lot within the startup community, as far as I know and what I've read. And then you have Paul Judge, which has multiple exits, tech entrepreneur. He's invested in the commuter incubator Tech Square Labs. He started the startup battle competitions, and he's got a new VC fund that he's a part of. And he started with he started with the startup showdown. They just had a contest, and none of which has been really focused on underrepresented founders. He had a very diverse lineup at Startup Showdown, but the winner was a white male that got the $100,000 investment. So with that as a backdrop, and this thing that I felt you had to have, that you attracted this highly successful, people may not, you probably know his company, Calendly. Okay. Calendly, I say that correctly.
Yeah.
It's I confess I've been using Time Trade, but I'm about to switch over because it's integrated with my CRM, and I can have a much more fluid operation when I set up my calls for my podcast guests as well as my client calls. But the CEO, Tope Awatona of Calendly, he's a self-made unicorn that started in the Atlanta startup community. He's Nigerian born, and he started this in 2013. So likely he faced even more challenges when it came to raising capital, because not only did you have this issue that we've been talking about with racial bias, but Atlanta didn't even really have a lot of angel investors back in 2013. We've really grown significantly in the last few years. So why did Tope join Zane and become an investor in Zane, and not just go off and enjoy his fruits of, and live life large or start his own thing? Is this a passion and a purpose project for him?
So Tope, is an outlier in any ecosystem, right? So he was set on starting this company, couldn't raise capital. He raised only 500,000 K before he had his recent raise.
No way, really? This
Yes, he
raise
only
that we
raised,
was just referencing,
yes,
500,000. Talk about bootstrap.
right. He
Wow.
bootstrapped. He gave up his savings, his retirement, all of that. And so he was hell bent on building this company, right? And could not find investors at all. And so I met Tope in 2019 at this event that we have here. It's an annual event for music and tech and talent. We've not had it since COVID. And I asked Tope, could I invest in his company? We had a call. I was so trying to build a track record, right? And I said, can we get a call so I can talk to you about your company? So he responded back, no. He wanted to focus on building his company. Fast forward 2021, Tope reaches out and asks me about a company that am I interested in. He's investing in the company. The round is being led by Harlem Capital. The company spun out of MailChimp here. And I said, okay, sure, I'm happy to look at the company. Are you interested in being an LP? And so he just said, let's talk. What Tope invested in Zane because Tope wanted to provide some capital for entrepreneurs who like him don't have those, that early capital to kind of get you started, right? That some of that pre-seed and seed capital. We don't have a family and friends around. So he invested not only in Zane, the venture fund, but Zane Access, the programming arm, because he saw that as critical to an entrepreneur's success before they go out and raise capital. So we have a programming arm. It's a nonprofit that does cohort-based learning to get entrepreneurs capital ready. And so for him, he supported both of those not only the fund, but the programming arm. He was at an event the other night and he shouted us out about how this will impact generations to come because we don't have that family and friends around. There's plenty of money at the seed stage, right? But a company that is barely trying to get the seed, where is that capital? The pre-seed, right? Some of the family and friends. We have great angel groups here in Atlanta. And so he appreciated the fact that not only we're going to try to educate these entrepreneurs, but we're also going to try to put capital in their hands. And so that's why he supported Zane. But he's not the only high growth entrepreneur in Atlanta that has also, I'll say in the Southeast. So we have George Z from Lease Query. His company is an accounting firm for leasing offices, I believe. And so he contributed significantly to our fund. There is a man in Alabama, Nigerian. He exited at 1.2 billion. He turned around and invested in Zane because he, like Tope, don't want entrepreneurs to go through what he has gone through. Now he in his exit, this is a guy who created a company in Birmingham. He maintained most of the ownership of his company. And so he is also trying to teach other entrepreneurs. So we have heavyweights like that who decided Zane was the best place to put their money because they're looking at the future of entrepreneurship and what is going to spin out of the Atlanta region, the Southeast, and how do we support them on their way. And so that's why all of these folks have decided that Zane was the best place to put their money. Because not only is it me, folks see me most of the time, but they see, people know Sig. Sig has an incredible track record of finding great talent and seeing those talent exit. He still has the largest exit to date, and that's the exit of TradeX and Ariba, the acquisition of TradeX by Ariba. And so, folks see me, I'm on the ground with entrepreneurs. Sig has a historical experience of investing in companies. So the two of us together is what folks are looking for. Who can get to the entrepreneur and who has the experience of investing? And so we make for a great mix with each other. So this is what Tope and all of the others are saying.
Yeah.
Right? That's credibility lended to me from Sig.
Yeah. Great. So you brought up Zane Access. So tell our listeners about sort of like, what is your process? Do you, and how do companies come in? Do they have to go through this access program or be a cohort? Do they just apply? And where are you with, because there's a never ending need for capital as we've addressed because of this shortage, but where are you in your process? Are you raising capital? Have you started investing? Just talk a little bit about that for our listeners.
Sure, Zane Access. So Zane Access started before the fund started. Once I got this idea of I wanted to start a venture fund, I was like, let me test the waters with entrepreneurs because it's horrible creating something that nobody wants, right? And so I said, let's have some forums. We started in New York. We did a couple there. We had people showing up on a rainy night, hungry for information around how do I get my startup going. We did the same thing here in Atlanta, same sort of folks showing up. How do I get so I did about 4 of those until I realized I had about 1,200 entrepreneurs in my database. So I said, there's something there. Founders are hungry for information. And so at first we were just going to keep it as forums. And then we just turned it into an entire programming arm in 2020 when we brought on our first cohort. Karen, so it's basically a capital readiness program. We come in, right now it's about 8 weeks of curriculum. We bring in folks who actually will potentially invest in these companies. And then we bring in subject matter experts to do a deeper dive into what it means to go out and raise capital as a person of color, a woman, that sort of thing. So we deal with biases in the fundraising process too. These companies have raised, in just 2 cohorts, we've raised over $8 million. We have about $7 million in revenue, and they've hired over 45 and counting people, and created that many jobs. And so it has been so successful in just a short period of time. And so that's one avenue we look for our portfolio companies. The last cohort, we just made our first investment out of the cohort. It's a woman who has an upskilling ed tech company. She has raised over 3.2 with us. Panoramic led the round, and we came in after. And then so now moving forward, we want to be able to invest in some of those companies. In terms of the 77 companies we've invested in so far, they come from a myriad of places, right? So Sig and I both are a part of the entrepreneurial system. So we get a lot of companies referred by other funds. I'm at one of my companies I met at Paul Judge's startup battle in 2018.
Okay.
And helped her get to a point. I actually sent her to Outlander, BC to get her first term sheet. And then we came in a little bit later. And so it's a myriad of spaces that we find deals. We have our own, inbound. We have just deals that come to us from co-investors who want us to kind of come in and help with the round. So it comes from everywhere. In terms of our fundraising, yes, we're still fundraising. We're fundraising and investing at the same time, which is critically hard for some folks. It's been doubly hard for us because we only have a small amount of money under management. I will say this, deal flow is never an issue. We get an abundance of deal flow. It's getting the capital to be able to match that. So I've raised a little bit over 3 million so far. Our target is 25 million. We hope to hit that by this summer. I am going on a road show to kind of do that. So we are looking for investors where this is important. Like, it's not charity. We're not looking for a philanthropic donation. We're looking for a return on investments to our LP. So it's not a concessionary. You give to Zane and, you did good. No, you did good. You also get a return on these entrepreneurs. And so again, targeting $25 million. It's a rough patch, right? To your earlier point, a lot of corporations came out and promised a lot, and they did, and they pattern matched exactly at that time, right? They saw one person funding and they just followed along the remainder. And so we did get funding. We got funded by Bank of America. They're our largest LP.
Really?
So we're really excited about that. We have a few other entities. Invest Atlanta is one of our LPs. So excited to have them as part of our network in terms of building up the entrepreneur ecosystem here in Atlanta. And then we have some other institutions that are outside of the city. But for us, the Southeast, it's lacking funding. We're the most underfunded region here in the country, but we're also the most diverse region in the country. And so we got to fix this problem. Again, as I explained earlier, this capital mismatch that we're having here in the Southeast. And I believe that we have that, right? Tope has shown that we can build, not only Tope, but it was a few unicorns we had last year. They all rolled out at the same time, and it gave Atlanta sort of the sort of push we need to kind of, compete with the Silicon Valley or the Boston or New York. And then now we have all of these major corporations that are coming to Atlanta. The Googles, Airbnb, Apple, all of that. We got to be ready for that. And it takes capital, because some of those founders are going to come out of these high growth companies, and they're going to be looking to starting their company. And where would they go for capital? We don't want them to leave and go to San Francisco because there's more opportunities there. We want them to stay here in Atlanta, right? And so they can scale and grow here.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's exciting stuff there. So for the listeners, real quick, is Zane.vc the best way to reach with you, particularly for the investors? Is there a way for them to go through there to say, hey, send me some information or something like that? Or how's the best way to reach you?
Right. We do have a form on our website, and it's for accredited investors only. So we do, they submit it and we send them our information with the hopes of getting a meeting with them. And so folks can go to Zane.vc and click on, I think it's team, and you'll see under the team button, if you're interested in investing at Zane, just to click that button, it'll take you to a form to fill out. Yeah.
And so for entrepreneurs, there's a qualification process to get into your Zane Access cohort program and coming through that. So with you, sounds like you got a lot of companies coming to you. What's some of the things that you look for somebody to get into your cohort?
So our biggest, we say it has to be a diverse founder and team, right?
Sure.
That is something that we will not deviate from. And so that's the primary. And then we're looking for, some traction. We're looking for some revenue, right? We do say data or dollars. If you have customers and you're only exchanging data, but you have a significant number of those clients or customers, we're happy to take a look at that particular company. We're industry agnostic, so we're not looking for companies of any particular industry The Southeast is our next primer, right? So you have to be in the Southeast, and the Southeast for us is as north as DC, as west as Texas, or let's just say Austin. And then as south as Miami is considered the Southeast for us. And so if you live in one of those regions, of course, that is, one of the indicators for us to consider you. In terms of Zane Access, now that's a little bit, these companies are a little bit earlier, right?
Oh, okay. So that would be, I'm sorry, there's a Zane Access. I'm looking at your logos on the screen. So there's a Zane Access, and then there's the fund cohort. They're two different
Right.
things.
No,
Okay.
so there's a Zane Access cohort. That's where you
Okay.
apply and you can become part of the cohort.
Okay.
We have 2 a year. The Zane, in terms of applying for investments, those are the things that I mentioned just a second ago. Those are the
Okay.
things we're looking for to make an investment from you. And so there's a form on our website for those inbound applicants as well. So Zane Access, and the website is accesszane.org. It is really for those who have not raised over 150K in capital, who don't have 100K yet in annual recurring revenue. And so these are very early companies. Some of them have a deck that needs some refining. And so those are the companies we take through the program. And at the end of it, they should be able to go out to have a successful fundraise, whether it's us or some other investor that they look for. We do have a graduation day where we kind of bring these entrepreneurs to the forefront and give them a bit more attention. We've done it online on Zoom, and so they would, be able to meet with investors while they're online. But now we're going to do it in person, so they'll be able to talk to some of these investors face to face. And so we'll be inviting out, the angel community, some funds that look for very early companies, that sort of stuff, just to get sort of a first look at these entrepreneurs as they begin their journey,
Yeah.
fundraising journey.
So just to clarify, when you say that part of the criteria for investment is some revenue, is that because that might be pre-seed? I'm just trying to understand, sort of make sure we have a common language of
It is
where.
primarily pre-seed, you're right. So we have found ourselves investing in more pre-seed deals than seed deals. Seed has gotten really, really crowded right now. We're beginning to compete with the Tiger Global, Sequoias, those folks who are now in the seed space. So it's become incredibly crowded and it's more expensive. Valuations are going up. And
Yeah.
so for us, we have to, we had a $10 million and under valuation. Well, pre-seed companies are coming with $6 million valuations. And so it's like the chicken and the egg sort of thing. Like, what are we really chasing here? And so we found ourselves in a lot of pre-seed deals, right? I think we only have one seed investment so far out of all the ones that we've made. And so we're like, okay, well, then they're not going to have revenue, right? But they may be exchanging some sort of value with customers.
Okay.
And so that's the most critical part. They have to be exchanging something with the customer base, whether it's data or dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I got you. So data meaning like they might be having some trials, or they're doing something where they've engaged their community and they've really validated their customer.
Exactly.
They know who their authentic customer is, that when a product is built or when a thing is really fully up online, then they know those people will buy it.
Absolutely. Right. They've gotten the feedback. They've found what might not work and what could work better. Just because they've been, working with their customers to kind of refine their product.
Okay, so is there any tips that you would like to offer up on things that now that you've looked at, you had the 1,200 companies that went through your forums that you came into your database, and you've got the and all the ones since the fund has gotten started. Is there something that you see as a consistent, like, I wish they knew this?
Well, I'll tell you what's consistent with the founders that I've invested in. They all have been bold entrepreneurs saying, hey, I found this problem and I'm the one that's uniquely qualified to solve it. And so I'm looking for those type of entrepreneurs. So the constant question I ask is, why you? Like, why are you? Why can you solve it? So all those whys we get, why you, why now, that sort of stuff. And so I think entrepreneurs really need to be ready to tell their stories. That's what we're going to dig into the most. It's just like my story. I have to tell the story of how I got here for invest and tell them where we're going with this, so that investors could, at least be somewhat interested in what we're doing, to have a follow-up call. And so I think entrepreneurs need to be able to answer those questions, and answer them in a way that the entrepreneur will want to follow up with something else. And so, what's your why? All of these founders, they were, the one that spun out of MailChimp, he was like, I'm going to solve this. He could have easily taken it to a department within MailChimp and say, hey, guys, here's something you may need to solve. But he decided, I'm going to create my own company because probably MailChimp is not the only one who's having this problem. There are others who may be having this problem too. And he was right. And so that's what I'm looking for. You're bold enough to take that idea and run with it and own it. That's what I'm actually looking for. I had one woman who we were talking to, and I had to like pipe down a little bit because I thought she didn't have tech within her company. She's a marketplace. And she was like, oh, no, here's my tech. And she began to explain the tech to both Sig and I. And we just sat back and was like, okay, so that's what we want. Don't take my, oh, well, you don't have tech. And, okay, well, they're not going to invest in me. No, make me ask the question, make me do the follow-up to find out what you're actually doing. Just don't take my no for an answer, right? Prove me wrong. That's what we're looking back for. Like, this is your product, you built it. I am not the expert here. You are.
Yeah.
And so show up as the expert. Yeah.
I love that because, a lot of times I'll talk to entrepreneurs and when I'm coaching them on these programs, like on the Zane Access and different things where I've been a mentor to them. And a big part of it oftentimes is their ability to describe their value proposition kind of a thing, right? And they'll talk about this. And part of it when I've coached startups as like through my coaching, my entrepreneur capital mastery program, I will say, you don't really get a lot of second chances to make that first impression. And so you really have to, within a short period of time, start to to establish the value because the entrepreneur, the investor is not going to play 20 questions with you. And so,
not at all.
And so what you just described is interesting because they had their why, but then you think that they don't have it. So then they'll go, oh no, I do have it. So, when I'm trying to think of how to phrase this question. The thing is that I have some companies that I've worked with and they're muddled, right? They're just muddled. And maybe that's the clarity of who their customer is or this kind of stuff or establishing the value proposition. But whether it's through your cohort where they are, they're going through a process of learning that, or, like in some of the programs where I've mentored and they're learning that, or in the case, because I know how SIG works. And so you're sitting down, this person's come through, they've qualified enough to get a meeting with you, but then they don't seem to have that spark. I'm sure you spend time with them, helping them to be better at their message and things like that. So address for the listeners about how can somebody reflect before they're in an audience that's helpful with you, or they've gone through a mentor program that's really, dug in to help them figure out how to explain their value proposition in the marketplace. What's something that they can reflect on that says they can ask themselves this question, and if they can't answer it in 2 sentences, they need to do more homework on figuring out their value proposition. Is there something like that you can do as kind of like a litmus test or a little golden nugget?
Yeah. So, and when we have our meetings, it's typically both Sig and I with the founder and the co-founder, if that's possible. But in terms of the value proposition, the way to kind of get it, and I believe me, I struggle with figuring out my own value proposition. I know I have one, but to be able to put it into words, to sell it to somebody is a little bit difficult. And so people have said to me, just think about first, I have to think about who am I representing whenever I go out, right? I realize that who am I going out doing this for, right? So I know I'm doing it for entrepreneurs who probably can't speak for themselves or whatever. So I would advise entrepreneurs, think about who your customers are and why you're doing it for them. And that's a good way to come up with your value proposition. And so I would suggest something like that. Put yourself in the customer's seat and think about what they're receiving from you, right? What is that value you think you're giving, or you think that you're receiving from your particular product, right? And so it can be hard for some folks, and I'll tell you this, it can be equally hard for diverse entrepreneurs who have been sort of I don't know what the word is, have been sort of trained, and that's probably not the best word, to keep things simple. Don't
Mhm.
overcomplicate anything, right? Say what you got to say and then step back. And I've seen this in our cohorts where the entrepreneurs are they're unsure if this is what they should be saying. So they'll say it and see how you react, and then they'll try to switch it. And it's like, find it and stick with it. Know that you're speaking whatever is your truth. We
Right.
don't know, we're not going to dig into that, but at least we will dig into the flip-flopping, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'll give you an example. We had this one young woman. It was a fintech company. We were excited about her. You know, there was a lot of press and all of that. But when we met with her, the humility was missing. It's great to talk about how well you're doing. It's great to talk about some of the investors you're looking at now, but she used that as an opportunity to overinflate who she was. Like, we can see right through that. And so that's what I guess I'm trying to say. Investors can see through the fluff, but we reappreciate the honesty, right? And the humility of what you're doing, even if if you don't have the right words for it, understand, like, just be genuine. Don't like say something really quick because you think that's what the investor wants to hear. That is not what we want to hear. Like,
Yeah.
we want to hear more about your company, more about why you started it, and who are these customers that you're talking about. So, you know, for me, it's like, keep your mind on those things. I was in an investor meeting, and you know, the person was pretty sharp to me, Karen, and I could have easily pushed back, but I kept the fact that hey, who are those entrepreneurs you're doing this for, Shyla? Right? You're investing in people who have not seen this kind of capital for their businesses ever. And so I had to keep my composure, let them rant on, and then come up with my sort of way of responding to them. And so, which is what we also deal with in the cohort. And if it's a bias or not, you're gonna run into something during the call
Mhm.
that you did not expect. And
Yeah.
just being prepared for that, right, is what I try to say to entrepreneurs in every aspect, whether it's your value proposition, your customers, why you're raising this money, and all of that sort of stuff. Be prepared for the unknown going into these meetings, because it could come out of left field and you would never expect it. I had someone say to me, well, when you raise this fund, will you stop being the Black woman on the panel? Or the Black VC on the panel? And I'm like, I cannot change who I am. I will always be this person, right? I might not be
Yeah.
talking about diversity all the time because I know more than just diversity, but I can't change who I am. And so it's those kind of things that founders are going to get asked too. And how do you respond in real time without them knocking you off your game, is what I try to talk to entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
confidence and all that or other stuff that comes into the meeting.
Yeah. Well, I steered a young male entrepreneur to your cohort, not and he got accepted in. And
Okay.
part of what I had told him was he had, he really struggled with that under the value proposition and explaining it. He's got good tractable success just in his space, but the value proposition of how does that scale was he was like struggling with thinking outside of
Mm,
what the success he was having in a local community, and part of that being who he was, his background, and who he knew, and things like that. And then how do you make that scale when you go
right.
beyond who do you have in on your like in your fast
Mhm.
fast list, right? And so um and but owning the fact that he was uncertain. That's okay to be uncertain, to
It
not
is.
have that build, when you go, as I've been talking to him, as he's been meeting, he comes back to me every once in a while, like, oh, I got this investor that I'm going to have this meeting with, and things like that and stuff. And so I'm looking to see how he evolves when he comes out of your cohort.
Okay, okay. And the one thing that investors have to understand, like, and I'm not saying make excuses for Black and brown and women entrepreneurs, but we are coming from, years of not being invited to the table. And
Right.
so some folks are still trying to figure out how do they show up and what is the right way to show up. And so I'm hoping investors don't use that as a way to say, well, diverse entrepreneurs are not ready because they don't know how to show up. Show them how to show up, right? That's exactly what we're doing when I'm talking to entrepreneurs about how they show up in this space, right? Yes, you may lack a little confidence and that sort of stuff, but keep coming back, right? Just don't give up. And so I just wish, I'm hoping that investors don't cut diverse entrepreneurs out because they don't speak the same language, or they may sound differently. Not that they're uneducated, they just are trying their best to be able to say what they think the investor wants to hear.
Yeah.
Instead of just having a genuine conversation.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and that goes back to my perception before that it's, all dollars are green, and, looking at what is the opportunity. And sometimes you struggle because this would be a case if anybody's got a accent. We got,
Right.
even, it like I remember one guy here in Atlanta who was from the Slavic regions. I forget which country, right? He had a really heavy accent, was doing a Park Mobile kind of a solution, right? And he struggled because people struggled with his, with his accent, and for some reason, I mean, we Southerners, I'll throw on my little Southern accent now. We Southerners are judged by our accent
We
sometime,
are.
regardless of the color of our skin and
Right.
stuff. So I think that, that's the thing for the investors that are listening. Look at who that entrepreneur is, regardless of an accent, and if you don't understand them, then it's okay to say, look, I really am interested in what you're talking about, but if I ask you a lot of questions and I ask you to repeat yourself, it's just because I'm trying to understand exactly
Right.
what you're saying. And you can, because great minds come in all different shapes and sizes, and the ideas that change our marketplace because of the innovation that they can bring, of identifying a need in an unsatisfied need in the marketplace that could generate revenue, that generates the green, that comes from all different sources. And you as an investor will miss out on opportunities, not only as a capitalist, but on the compassion side of addressing a need in the marketplace and putting your dollars to work where it can have an impact to be the potential $7 trillion, economic impact in our economy. If you just, make sure that you don't let your ears or your eyes affect your opinion of an opportunity.
Right. That's absolutely right. You don't know who's sitting in front of you and that they could be the next unicorn. And so it's just like, give people a space to kind of, be who they are. We shouldn't have to fake it, right? That whole imposter syndrome means I show up as someone else. I'm showing up as myself in these meetings, right? And take me at face value, right? And so I think that's what we want entrepreneurs to do. So founders, not entrepreneurs, that's what we want investors to do. So founders don't show up, having to bring imposter syndrome with them, just to be able to, have a conversation with an investor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, very good, Shyla. Thank you so much for being a guest. I'm glad we got this booked.
I know.
And you're really a busy lady for good reasons. And I'm glad you took the time out to share your insights with the listeners of the Compassionate Capitalist Show. Anything you'd like to add before we sign off?
Nope, I just want to just remind people we're the most diverse region here in the country, and we should be celebrating that through entrepreneurship and innovation. And I'm hoping that, folks will join the two of us in doing that because it's a part of our daily life. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So with that, everybody, thank you for tuning in. There's a little closing message that you're here if you're listening to the podcast and listen to that. And I want to say to everybody, share this podcast with somebody else. If you can figure out how to do a like and a thumbs up, I have not actually been able to figure it out on some of these platforms, but do that because it counts. And share this on LinkedIn. Share this podcast with the folks that are in your community, so this message gets out there. And onwards and upwards. Have a great day.